Welcome to today's Awesome Marriage Podcast. I am so excited to welcome Julie Baumgardner. She's a Senior Director of WinShape Marriage. You may have seen her sharing marriage wisdom on WinShape social media pages or on her talk show, First Things First. She joins me today to help you learn how to have a productive conversation with your spouse about money. You're going to love this. Let's go right to the studio. Well, Julie, welcome to the Awesome Marriage Podcast. Thank you so much for saying yes. I'm excited that you are here and excited to spend some time with you today.
I'm honored to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Well, me too. So let's kind of get into some of the stuff on money, because I know as a counselor, you know that money is always one of the top topics that couples fight over. And it's just a big reason for divorce. They just can't resolve that. So it seems, though, I think that sometimes it doesn't really matter. I think sometimes we think if we have all this money, we're not going to have money problems. But that's not really true, is it? There's stress whether you have money or whether you don't have money. Why is that?
I think based on spending a lot of time with couples that we enter into marriage, and oftentimes we don't have a conversation about what money means to me and how I think about money. I can even remember back to when my husband and I got married. We've been married 34 years. And when we were walking down the aisle, I came to marriage with a lot of debt because I put myself through college. So I had a lot of student loans. And my husband is a saver. Then we get married, and I realize I'm the one paying all the bills. And one day I just said to him, "Do you think I'm spending all of our money? Because I'm the one who pays all the bills. I buy the birthday presents. I buy the Christmas presents." And he said, "No, I really don't think that." But that kind of got us off to the races. And I think we're not much different from most couples where you come to marriage, you have different perspectives about money. You don't necessarily talk about what it means to you, how you think about it, and therefore you argue about it.
Absolutely. You know, I think that you mentioned the spender saver thing, which I think is a big deal. And sometimes you don't really realize that until you get into marriage. Maybe as a lady, you're thinking, "God, he buys me a lot of nice things," and you don't know that he's putting them all on a credit card that's getting run up on the other side.
It's so true. Yeah.
And so you just don't realize that until you get into it. Yeah, we were so young, and we both had checking accounts, but we've been in college, and our parents had helped us in college, and so we get married at 20 years old, and it's like we had no idea what to do with money, although we realized we didn't have any pretty quickly.
Well, and I think what you just said is a great point, especially today. There's a lot of young people who are going through life and their parents are helping them. They're helping them with their cell phone. They're helping them with insurance. They're helping them with other things. And then they get married and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I had no earthly idea what all is involved here. And I'm not good at managing this. I've just used a credit card." So,
and I think as parents, I think we try to do better with our kids and teach them a little bit how to manage money, because, Nancy, I neither one really were taught that by our parents. I mean, I don't think we were crazy wild spenders, but we really didn't know how to do that. We really didn't know how to budget. We didn't really know how to plan or do any of those kind of things because growing up in our home, stuff just appeared. The refrigerator was full every time I went to it at home, because my mom kept it full. And so we had to learn those kind of things for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the opportunity that folks have as they're preparing to come together is to really have a discussion around money and what it means to you. I would say most people don't realize that you learned a whole lot about money as you were growing up because you were watching what was happening in your own home, who paid the bills, and the kinds of purchases that were made. And if you lived in a family where there was just a lot of stuff all the time and no mention about money, I can remember a time that our daughter said, "Well, just pull out the credit card. That's the money." And I'm like, "No, it doesn't grow on trees."
No.
So
that's funny.
Yeah,
we had kind of a similar experience with our son in an ATM. He said, "Well, Dad, just go to that money machine." Well, I can't because there's nothing in there. Right.
Yeah, so I think there's opportunity to learn, and as you learn, there's less angst.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So these past experiences you kind of alluded to as we grow up, how do they impact the money conversations that we have with our spouse? Because most couples probably there was at least some differences in the family of origin they grew up
Hmm.
in and how money
Hmm.
was handled.
Yes. This is the opportunity to be curious and to
Mm.
ask questions. How was money handled in your home? What did you learn about money? Because some people have learned that money is made to be given away.
Mm.
Others have learned money is made to create security. So we save it and we plan for the future. And some other families, it's like, oh, we have this money. Let's go on a trip because we have the opportunity to do that. While one person may say, well, that's frivolous. That is not being good with your money. Another family might say, oh, no, no, no. That is absolutely being good with money because we value experiences. And if we
Hmm.
have the money in the bank to do it, we're going to go and we're going to play as a family and create memories. So the idea of being curious with each other about what you learned about money and what it currently means to you helps you get off to a really good start as a couple because then you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, what does money mean to us?
Yeah, that is so good. And I think that's such important questions to ask that I
Hmm.
think a lot of times couples don't take the time to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I
For
definitely
sure.
think that I, so often I think we think love is going to carry us. And so
Hmm.
if there's an issue, well, we just love each other enough. And yet you find out just a few days into marriage that it's more than that. And certainly thinking about, well, none of this money belongs to us anyway. It belongs to the Lord and we have been entrusted with it. So what does it look like to be good stewards of what he's given to us?
Absolutely. You mentioned that you came into marriage with some debt because of school loans and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But I've had couples I've worked with that came into debt with credit card debt and things
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
How should a couple approach that when they begin to talk about money before they get married, even?
Mm-hmm. I would for sure say be honest. Be
Mm.
honest about what's there. I had a friend who said I felt so guilty about coming into the marriage relationship and having all this debt. I didn't want my husband to have to take that on, and yet her husband was like, "No, we're a team." So we're going to figure out how to do this together. But you have to be forthright with what you're dealing with so that then you can have the honest conversation. So when I came to the table and told my husband, I have a lot of college loans and I fully intend to pay them off, our conversation sounded similar to theirs in that he said, well, we will figure it out together and it will be a priority for us to pay that off first. I think the other interesting piece of our conversation, and to be honest, this wasn't something that I had done prior, and that was tithing. So my
Hmm.
husband said, tithing, I feel like it's really, really important. The Lord tells us 10%. And I feel like no matter where we are, that that's going to be the priority. And then we'll figure out paying off the debt as we go. And the interesting thing is that over time, in 34 years, we have tithed and we have not wanted. We've been able to pay off the debt and be responsible with where we were wanting to head in terms of managing money. So being
Yeah.
forthright and honest is for sure valuable. You don't want to have angst on the other side of why did you not tell me this before we
Right.
walk down the aisle?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then all of a sudden you're into marriage and maybe things are going pretty good that first month, and all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, oh, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, I have a
Yeah.
$25,000 in debt. Well,
Yeah.
it's different talking about it before than talking
Yeah.
about it later, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting is culture says so many things like, hey, don't put your money together
Mm.
and be sure and keep a little something, something aside in case things go sideways. And you and I both know that your best chances in terms of marriage are number one, to be all in. My
Yes.
husband and I are both children of divorce. And so sometimes
Yes.
people come to marriage and think, oh my goodness, what if we can't make it work? And the flip side of that is we're all into figuring out how to make it work. And there's a very interesting recent piece of research that talks about money and couples having separate accounts and marital happiness. And the couples who had joint accounts and managed their money together, worked to pay off debt that they might have brought to the relationship, their marital happiness was far and away more so than the couples that had separate bank accounts.
That makes so much sense. And when I teach pre-marriage counseling, that's the one thing I don't tell people I have to do that, but I try to help them see. I think you just start out with separateness in one part of your marriage
Yeah.
if you don't put
Yeah.
it together, right?
That's right. Independence versus interdependence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, I don't know, it feels like Nancy and I did probably just because we didn't have anything. And so we each had our little checking accounts we had in college, and
Yeah.
we just got rid of
Yeah.
those, and we had one
Right.
together from the beginning. So it's kind of
Yeah.
easy for us. We hadn't had our careers for a while. We didn't have some money set back. We didn't have a lot of those kind of things. And I get make it a little more difficult for people to do that, or at least to consider that. But I think no matter what, that oneness is so important.
Yes,
And
I agree.
I had a couple one time that he made 70% of the income, she made 30, and divided every bill like that. And I said, you guys are just, when that happens, is there tension? Is, what goes on there? And they said, yeah, it's not fun every month. And I said,
Right.
why not do something different?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's just not.
Yeah. I've actually seen couples where the husband says, I make all the money, I make all the decisions. You talk about angst in a relationship versus, okay, I am at home taking care of the children and managing a household, and you are external. Yes,
Yeah.
you are at a different job, but together we're on this journey. And so it is so much better when you can sit down and discuss how we're going to budget our money, allocate it, spend it, all of that. When you can do it and be on the same page, it makes for a much less drama-filled marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that kind of gets into the next thing I wanted to talk about. How do our money habits and attitudes reflect our core values and what we believe to be true about ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wonder how often we as couples stop and just ask the question, what really matters to us? What are the things that we believe are core values for our marriage? So whether you're preparing for marriage or you're already way into your marriage, it's never too late to ask that question. What's our core
Right.
values? Not what your parents' core values are for you, and
Yes.
not what other people's, like, keeping up with the Joneses, but what are our core values? And then based on, hey, as believers, we do believe that everything belongs to the Lord. So for one, we want to be Christ honoring with everything we do with our money. And so that means being wise, taking care of the needs, and tithing. And then perhaps maybe adventures is a core value for you. And so you save money for adventures. Maybe one of your core values is we feel strongly about going into debt. So if we decide we want something, we're going to save for it. And then we will buy it when we have the money. Having conversation around all of those things helps you explore, what am I bringing to the table individually? What are we talking about here as a couple? What are our core values? And then managing money around what we say really matters to us.
And so if you get on the same page with those core values, then it really is easier to put the money to match that in whatever way that works out.
I think sometimes people think that this whole managing money thing is just so complicated. I just don't want to talk about it. And if you can we have a game that we play in our premarital experience called Money Habitudes. And in that game, I love it because it's not intimidating. It just gives couples an opportunity. They play the game individually
Hmm.
and they figure out, oh, this is my habitude. Like security really matters to me. I grew up
Uh,
poor. I don't want to live that way. So security is a big deal. For the person that they're marrying, they may not have experienced that kind of lifestyle at all growing up, and they have a very different habitude. Not wrong, different.
just different.
And so I think that that's this perspective within which we have to approach money is this opportunity to see, oh, this is what I think and feel about it. Now, how do we come together and decide
Hmm.
jointly about how we're going to move forward with that? Because one person might think furniture in the house is really important, and the other person might think a vacation is more so.
Sure.
Well, how do you have that conversation?
Absolutely. Well, you kind of said something that made me think too. If somebody grew up in a home where there was just they saw their parents fighting over money all the time,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
that
yeah.
might be a reason that they would say, "I don't know if I want to talk about money
Yeah.
because my parents just went to blows over this kind of thing." And so
Yeah.
it's really, I guess, realizing that you want to do something different.
Yes. And also realizing that tools are available to you,
Yeah.
such as money
So good.
habitudes and other things that can help you explore money in a non intimidating, really non explosive kind of way. You can have
Hmm.
conversations around what you think about it and then figure out a way forward together. I really wanted to be on the same page as my husband. I hadn't grown up in a situation where everybody's saved. There was more spending going on.
Hmm.
I wouldn't categorize myself as a spender, but I wasn't uh, to the same extreme, I guess, that my husband was. And I would say we've balanced each other out really
Hmm.
nicely. We've saved, we've had fun adventures, we've done some things, but we made those decisions early and continue to have conversation. I think some people think you've got to put it on a spreadsheet, you've got to talk about it weekly, you've got to have it all together. And I'm like, you know what? Some people do that, but not everybody does that. You can have conversations around money without having to get, methodical with every single penny.
Yeah, and it's not you're right and he's wrong or he's wrong and you're
Right.
right, right? I mean, it's
Right.
trying to find that middle ground or listen to each other well enough to say that I hadn't thought about that. That really made sense.
Or that really matters to you. I can tell
Yeah,
that that is
yeah, I
really
love that.
important to you. And I want to talk about that further. And I want to be honoring around how do we make that happen? Or how do we plan for that for the future? We may not be able to make it happen tomorrow.
But it's just working together instead of
Yes.
against each other.
Yeah. It's really,
And you,
yeah.
yeah, well, you said something earlier that I thought was so important, and you said that we have to realize that everything belongs to the Lord. And I think
Hmm.
when we have that mindset that and I think that's hard in our culture, but it's not really ours, it's his anyway. And
Yeah.
he gives it to us to steward, to manage, to
Yeah. Yeah.
it gives us a lot of freedom with it, doesn't he?
He does. And I think probably one of the most powerful messages is you cannot worship two masters.
Mm.
And so if the Lord is Lord of your life, then he's your master. And so the vertical here is that relationship. And when you are thinking about managing your money, taking it to the Lord in prayer and asking for wisdom and guidance about you have given this to us. What are we to do with these fruits?
It's so
And
good.
he instructs us that the first fruits are his. And then, my goodness, beyond 10%, there's all of this that you have opportunity to do something with. And you made a statement early on about you can have a lot or you can have a little. And you can still argue about it. And there, gosh, there is so much truth in that. I talk with people and they're like, well, if we just had this, well, if we just had a little
Mm.
bit more. And the truth is, um, if you can't figure out how to live within your means with a little, it will be very complicated for you to figure out how to live within your means with a lot. And so it makes a lot of sense to take the time, as you were talking about when you all were young and had
Yeah,
nothing, to think about what does money mean to us and how will we use it to glorify God. That's just such a powerful and great conversation
absolutely.
to have early on. And if you haven't had it early on, you can still have it. And moving
Yes,
forward, you can do that.
especially if you're having conflict with money every month,
Right.
or just
Yes.
you've never taken the time to share those values with each other, which is, I love that. That's such a good idea and an important step, I think, for couples to take.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So, why does handling money well matter in a Christian marriage? We've kind of danced around that. What would you
Yeah.
say?
I would say that one, as believers, we're held accountable and responsible for our behavior and the kinds of things that we do. And we were just talking a minute ago about living beyond your means. So when you think about how we're called as believers to live, being
Mm-hmm.
responsible for how we live and the kinds of things that we do with our money speaks volumes about our character and who
Mm.
we are. So when I think about honoring the Lord, I do think my behavior around money matters. And if I'm frivolous with it and I'm not thoughtful about the opportunities that I've been given with it, um, it's a reflection on really how I feel about the Lord and what He has given me to steward. So I haven't done that well my whole entire life.
Right.
Um, but I think I've been a lot more thoughtful about that, especially when you have children. You think
Mm-hmm.
about it feels like there's never
Yes.
enough, and
No.
yet when you get to launch, you're like, wow, the Lord really carried us through and provided. And just when we thought that, my goodness, I don't know, I mean, we feel like we've been responsible, and yet it just doesn't feel like it's going to come together, and it does. So, fishes and loaves. I do think
Yeah.
there's accountability and responsibility there, which is why it's great to have conversations as a couple. It's also wonderful to have people who are a little bit ahead of you on the journey, who have done this well. You've been watching them and they've done it well, to ask them to help you work through, guide you in a process of perhaps having that conversation if you feel like you can't do it by yourselves.
That's really good. That's really good. So I want to ask you a question though. Say if a couple is have saved, they're trying to buy a new car, and she wants a BMW, and he's happy with a Kia,
Yeah.
and they're both good cars, but there's a big
Right. They
difference in the
are.
price.
Right.
What would you say to them? Is it one a right or wrong? Is the one who wants the BMW, is she wrong because she wants that kind of car? Is he being too whatever if they can afford the one to go with the other? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I think I would just ask questions. And I think I would start with, tell me what this means to you,
Mm.
and why is this important? And then, have you taken into consideration the pros and cons of both cars? Like what repairs will cost with
Mm.
both cars, the difference in an oil change for a BMW and a Kia,
Mm.
and the difference in tires and that sort of thing. Um, what is the driving force? Is the driving force status? Is the driving force, I love a fast car, I like the way it feels? I tell you, people make decisions based on emotion and they
Mm.
justify it later. So there can
Yes.
be all kinds of things going on there. And it isn't for me to say, oh, that is a terrible decision. What I do think people need to think about is, over the long haul, what does this mean? And might you regret this a month or two? Because, I mean, once you drive that off the lot, we all know it loses a ton of value. and,
Right.
and so, are you ready for that? And you may both have plenty of money and you feel like, yes, we're ready and we can afford it. And I love that car. That's your decision. The deal is being responsible and accountable
Mm.
to each other, and being able to have the conversation around it. So one's
Yeah.
very, very practical, and one is, yes, but I love this car.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is where you get to have a great conversation and figure out together, okay, well, how do we do this? And
I
that's,
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense, and I think too. The only thing that I would say probably too is if that BMW becomes if that becomes my God,
idle.
the
Then we're
idol,
in trouble.
then we're in trouble.
Absolutely.
But if you go through the process you're talking from, and you like that, it's not
Yeah.
taking the place of God, and
No.
you can do it without causing you financial
Yeah.
problems. That God's
Yep.
not going to say, "Why'd you
Right.
do that?"
Right.
Yeah.
I've had people say to me, well, as believers, I mean, it's bad for Christians to have a lot of money. And I'm like, well, where in the Bible does it say that? Because I haven't read that in the Word. What I have read is to take the money that has been given to you and use it in a way that's Christ honoring. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a measuring stick, is what I'm about to do Christ honoring. And if we as a couple can come together and say, we feel confident that this is a good use of the money, then move forward. If you're questioning, then I would say hit pause and be
Mhm.
prayerful about it. And the prayer isn't, Lord, change my spouse's mind. The prayer
No,
is,
no.
Lord, help us to be wise and to make good decisions. I know believers who drive beautiful, expensive cars, and they're also incredibly generous people. I
Yes.
also know people who have lots of money and they have never driven anything but used cars, and that's their philosophy. It takes a whole lot of
Right.
different personalities to make the world go around. So it's not that it's right or wrong, it's what is right for you as a couple.
Well, I love that you talked about the prayer part of it, and maybe sometimes
Yeah.
we're afraid to pray about something because God may say no, but
He might. I
so
mean,
we
you might just have
don't.
that door slammed shut. Yeah.
But yeah, but I think we have to trust God enough to know that if He does, that He has something better for us or something
Mm-hmm.
better to do with that money. So I
Mm-hmm.
think and I think too, when Nancy and I've had a big decision, if we've talked it through, really shared with each other, and we've prayed about it, then we're pretty confident if we haven't got a
Yes.
closed door somewhere that okay, yeah,
Right.
this is
Yeah.
okay for us to do this right now. And I
Yeah.
don't want to be
Yeah.
legalistic about it, but I think we
No.
do want to involve God in those decisions because He has such a different perspective than we do on things.
Yeah. Well, and we have just always said, hey, we're gonna pray about these decisions, and if either one of us feels like there's a caution light or a red light, then we're gonna stop and we're gonna have conversation around that. But we're not gonna just keep forging through just because one of us feels like yes, yes, yes. I'm gonna demand that we do this. We really feel like the best way for us to work as a team and be interdependent on each other is to recognize um, sometimes Jay's wisdom and strength. I need to leverage that,
Hmm.
and other times we need to leverage my strengths when we're thinking about purchases or things that we might do with the house, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good. So couples are listening to us and they're going, "Oh, we've never talked about this." How would you advise them of going about that conversation? And maybe they've tried in the past and it just ended up in a fight every time because they
Yeah,
just maybe
yeah.
didn't listen well, didn't really want to hear what others saying. How can they have an effective conversation?
I think one, you certainly could play the money habitudes game. You can do that online. So I'm a fan of that. I
Yes.
think you could begin a conversation by talking about how money was handled in your own home,
Hmm.
because that is a very real thing. Certainly talking about, well, what are your financial aspirations? Um, I've talked with some young couples and they'll be like, well, we don't want to get married until we have all of these things in play. And I know a lot of folks significantly older than me who got married and didn't, they'll tell you, gosh, I didn't have two pennies to rub together.
Yeah.
But we were a team and we're like, we're going to figure this out. So you figure it out together. So talking about what your current financial goals are, asking, what do you think about debt? Are we good with debt? If we are good with debt, how much debt are
Mm.
we good with? Um, what what do we think about taking financial risks like investments and those
Hmm.
sorts of things? Would we be willing to do that? And if you can tell that money is creating stress, what is it about money that's stressful? And putting that on the table. If what's stressful is I'm always fearful about the shoe dropping, me losing my job. Yes, I know I have money in the bank and I can afford to pay the bills, but what if? Okay, name the
Hmm.
what ifs and let's
That's good.
talk through those. So as you begin to have that conversation, the deal is this isn't a you're right, I'm wrong. You are being curious. And in being curious, you're learning. And as
Mm.
you learn about someone, when when Jay and I talk, he'll often say, "You're a gift to me from the Lord." And
Mm.
my goal and purpose is to help you be all that God has called you to be. And I feel the same way about him. So
So
if
good.
we can think about that when it comes to money, hey, my job is to understand you and not to laugh at you or say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard,
Yeah.
but to say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Understand. I don't necessarily have to say, oh, I 100% agree with that, but I
Right.
can say, thank you for sharing that. That's significant. And then figure out, okay, how do we take all of what we've said here and put it on the table and make a plan for what we want to do moving forward. I We laughed recently because every house that we've lived in, we have redone.
Hmm.
We either moved into it and redid it, or we redid it and moved it. And I mean, like tiny house to a little bit bigger house. And we don't live in a big house now, but when we moved into the house we're currently in, my mother said to me, now you have the house you've always dreamed of. And I said, actually, no, Mom, we have the house that you have always dreamed of for us. And
Mm.
I think what's really important about that is that you can have people whispering in your ear. You should live in this neighborhood. You should drive this certain type of car. You should wear these certain
Sure.
type of clothes. You should be involved in these things. You know what? Shoulds are really dangerous. And when you listen to all that chatter, you actually miss out on the real conversation about who are you as a family? Who is
Mm.
God calling you to be? What is He calling you to do with your money? Not what all these other people think you should be doing. And if you can start out from that perspective and not think about, oh, my parents are going to be so disappointed if we don't live in a certain neighborhood and do
Hmm.
all these certain things. Do what is right for you as a
Mm.
couple, as a family. That's a really great
That's so good.
conversation to have and place to start.
So it's okay to be different. It's
It
okay
is
to not
100%.
buy it, not to buy
Yes.
into all that stuff that everybody
Yeah.
on the block has this new
Yeah.
kind of car or whatever. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes it's not the most popular decision, but I'm here to tell you the
Mm.
stress that comes with trying to keep up with the Joneses and be all that, um, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And the
Hmm.
couples that find themselves in that scenario will tell you, if I had it to do over again, I would do it differently.
Mm. That's so good. So do couples, are they aware of their money stories? Because we've talked around that a lot. Do
Yeah.
you think we are?
Yeah. I think often we're not. And that's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
I make such a big deal about it's important to know your money story. It's important to
Yeah.
know what you think about it. Because I do think that's what gets you sideways. Because you'll go out and you'll buy something and your spouse will say, well, that's frivolous. That was spontaneous. We didn't even talk about it. And you are thinking, you're right. It didn't occur to me. So understanding your money story and having a conversation around, hey, what is okay to spend without coming and saying, hey, I'd like to go buy this. It costs X
Yeah.
amount of dollars. Knowing, hey, we've agreed upon X amount, and this is what we know. If it's over that, you can count on the fact that I'm going to come and we're going to have a conversation around it. Is now a good time? Maybe the
Yeah.
house payment is due or the car payment is due, and now is not a good time
Right.
to buy that.
No, that's good.
So
And I love that, what you were saying about, I think Nancy and I did that early on, that we had an amount that we could spend without the other person say anything, just so we had some freedom with that. And,
yeah,
and it was like my deal was I was saving my, whatever it was, $50, $100 a month, whatever it was back then for a TV, a bigger TV.
yeah, yeah,
And she wanted to buy, she had things she wanted to buy for the house, little things. And so,
yeah.
she'd bring home something and put it on the shelf. And, first off, I'd say, why would she buy that? But I learned to say nothing and just know that was okay.
Smart man.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not like I didn't mess up a couple of times first. But I think that, I think to me, I think that's always good to have a little bit of money, whatever you can afford to not hurt your budget, to just kind of spend as you want. And then we
Yeah.
did something that I think was, and I don't know who suggested it, we made a wish list of things that we wanted for the house. And when we'd say we got extra money, well, it wasn't a argument then. We made that wish list before we had the
Yeah.
money. So number one,
Yeah.
we do that. Number two, all those kind of things down the list. And I think that really helped. And it helped me value things that she valued that I probably wouldn't have valued before until we really took the time to talk about it. Does that make sense?
I think that's so important. What you just said about she brought something home for the house, I guarantee if you actually asked her, hey, tell me about that, there's something about warmth, there's something about making your house a home. And so there are men and women that is like, no, what we have in our home, the furniture, how we create warmth. Like, this is a sanctuary. This is a place I want to love being. Well, the other spouse, that may not be as high on the list. So I love that instead of going, what in the world and why would you spend money on that? You just saw that there was value, that there was something for her in purchasing that and bringing it home for the house that made it special.
Yeah, there was some time probably in the first year or two of marriage that I realized this house is so nice and I love what she has done with it. And it's so different than my dorm room was. And which was terrible, and realized she really is building us a home, a sanctuary together.
Yeah.
And I learned to value that, which I don't think I valued that at all going into marriage. And I did.
Yeah. When you think about what we're given money for, ministry, I hope would be part of that in some way, shape, or form. That was one of the things that we talked about, that we want our home to be a place of ministry where people can come and be comfortable and just know that, hey, we just love having you here. We're not we're not trying to impress you. We want to create warmth where you can just come and be and relax and exhale from all that's going out in the world.
Yeah, that's really cool. And to learn to value, that's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can individuals and couples start to understand their money stories and attitudes? We kind of get them to begin to be aware of it. And then what's the next step there?
So this is an ongoing conversation. So it's not a once and done. It is let's begin the conversation and let's talk about what we think about money. Let's understand what we value. And then let's keep on having that conversation. I think when you don't look at it as, oh, this is a one-time thing and once and for all, we're just going to make decisions, because things change, right? And so learning how to flex, I think some of the most powerful moments in our marriage have come when things have been really challenging financially. Well, you got to have the conversation around that and figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to adapt and adjust and make changes? And so instead of being fearful, it's a conversation around, okay, we're going to figure this out. Like, we've figured out a whole lot of things. This is just one more. And I have confidence in us. We have confidence in us as a team that we're going to attack that. We're not going to attack each other in terms of what's happening. So I think looking at it as this is an ongoing story, and there are going to be ruts and pivots and hills and valleys and great times and maybe really hard times. You think about COVID and people had no
Oh,
earthly
yeah.
idea what was going to happen. I mean, we live like we think we know what tomorrow holds, and we don't have any earthly idea what tomorrow holds.
No,
We're
we
not even
don't.
guaranteed tomorrow, right?
No.
So, I just think if we can understand this is an ongoing story and we are writing it chapter by chapter, and so we have to keep having conversations around it and be exploratory and curious. Tell me more about that. Can you unpack that for me? Versus jumping on your spouse and feeling like you're trouncing on their heart when they're trying to talk about money, finances, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and if you're trouncing on their heart, you're not going to have the marriage you want.
No.
You go closer to these kind of conversations that you're talking about.
Yes, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So it's not like great marriages are free of conflict or free from having
Right.
hard conversations about money. Great marriages have conflict. It's how they do the conflict dance, if you will, that brings them closer together and more intimate versus tearing away at the foundation of their marriage relationship. So remembering, hey, money is a thing. It is a resource. It is something that we have, and we're given the opportunity to do something with it. It's been entrusted to us like the parable of the talents. So how are you going to take it
Right.
and use it wisely? And I think when we look at it from that perspective and try and figure out what's the way forward for us together, how do we agree on this and look at it as this is something that the Lord's called us and given us the opportunity to steward well.
So good. Yeah, as a couple things came into my mind just thinking about times that we had worked through something together and the feeling afterwards. I mean, we were hugging and high-fiving, and it was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
With
we
God's
did
help,
that.
we really did this. Yes,
Yeah.
we really did it.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's just really special when things like that happen. And if you're not working together, they're never going to happen.
That's right. And when you do accomplish that, recognizing, hey, this is just, it's taking you to another level in terms of your marriage relationship. And to your point, nobody gets married and says, oh, I am just looking forward to the fights. They get married saying, I'm looking forward to loving you, and I'm looking forward to the bliss. And so being able to understand you've got two different people who grew up in two different homes, two different personalities. And the goal is not to make each other more like yourself. It's to literally learn, hey, God gave me you. You are made in the image of our Creator. And you have this gifting and skills, and together he's calling us to learn to dance with money, dance around all kinds, figuring out children, figuring out in-laws, boundaries, all these things. Every one of them is an opportunity.
That's awesome. That's so good. You've talked a little bit about your own marriage too. Jay is your husband?
Yes.
So how has this played out in your guys' marriage over the 34 years?
Well, interestingly, I did not anticipate being the one that would be responsible for the bills and really managing the money, but I have been for the duration of our marriage. However, over the years, we have consistently had conversations around money and how we felt like God had called us to use the money for ministry. And so we had conversations around debt. Funny story, it wasn't funny in the moment, but funny. We were actually teaching a premarital experience, and we were being interviewed about how we handled money. And Jay proceeds to tell everybody that I came to our marriage with a lot of debt and that he had paid off all this debt. And I am sitting there like smoke is coming out of my ears because I'm like, we did that
Wow.
together. And so, anyway, we finished the whole interview process and we get in the car and he turns to me and he goes, that was amazing. I mean, they were just with us. And I turned to him and I was like, that was not amazing. I'm embarrassed. Like, yes, I came with that debt, but that's how I managed to get through school and get my degree and do what I do. And we paid that off together. And he stopped dead in his tracks. And he looked at me and he said, I am so
Mm.
sorry. I did not mean to embarrass you. I would never do that intentionally. And I will not do that again. And I was like, apology accepted, because he was very sincere. And so even though money can be sensitive, to be able to have a conversation like that, boy, early on in our marriage, we would have been off to the races. And the day,
Yeah.
I mean, we probably would have gone all day without talking. But that was early in the morning when that happened. And as we were driving home and the apology happened and we talked it through, we get home and we carried on with our day. And so I would say over time that we've matured a
Mm.
lot, but it's also because we've been willing to sit and have the hard conversations. I don't think we were super great at it early on. We were persistent at having the conversations and we were curious. And over time, the tithing has been,
Mm.
I would tell you that has been one of the best decisions we've ever made as a couple. Just straight out of the gates, this is our priority
Hmm.
for us. We felt like debt was something that we really wanted to think long and hard about before we were willing to do that. And so we wanted to be wise, but we also wanted to be generous. And so just thinking through how we can help people, could care less if anybody ever knew that we were the ones helping. Just because we felt like we have the opportunity to do something for someone, we're going to do it. And
Hmm.
there is there is something to be said. I know there's research behind giving to others. You are blessed to be a
Hmm.
blessing, and there's research behind when you do things for other people, chemicals are released in your brain and in your body
Hmm.
that feel good. And so being generous, I think, is a great attribute, and that's something that we've had fun doing together. So I think we've grown a lot in how we've managed
Oh,
our money and what money means to us.
yes, and I agree. And I think when we're generous together, a couple of
Mm,
times I think we've had an opportunity to do something for somebody anonymously where they didn't
yes,
know that we did it. That was
right.
probably some of the most
Oh,
fun things that we've done.
yes.
In fact, I had that one lady we had paid her electric bill. She's a single mom, and I ran into her one day, and she was telling me, "Oh, you remember that hard time I was in? Somebody paid my electric bill," and I thought, "Well, that was so nice, and
Yeah,
just never, just I don't know. It was something Nancy and I shared together, and just the two of us and her pastor were the only ones that knew that we did it, and that was really
yeah, yeah.
special. It was really special.
Well, I think keeping your eyes wide open for where God is calling you to
Hmm.
join Him in His work. And He's not calling you to like shout it from the mountaintop, hey, I did this. He's more just
Right.
saying, hey, would you just come alongside and just be aware, and where you see need, then be a kingdom builder and be generous with what I've given
Hmm.
you. And I think that has been special for us as well.
I think so. I did want to reiterate how Jay handled that with you after he had thrown you under the bus in front of all those couples. Uh, Guys, that is the response. That is the response. He was humble. He listened to you, and he apologized, and you knew it was from his heart. That diffuses everything because what
Yeah.
you said you guys would have done early in marriage, it's absolutely what we have done. We may have talked for
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 days after something like that,
Yeah.
but what he did in that moment was powerful. I mean,
Yes.
he connected with you at a time when you didn't feel connected to him.
Right, right. Well, and I think there's this, I'm always asking the question, and I think we've gotten to the place where we both are asking, do I want to be right or do I want to be in relationship?
Mm.
And Jay is a good man and he is honoring of me. And there are going to be times where I do something that isn't very honoring, or he's going to do something that isn't very honoring. I want to be in relationship with him way more than I care about, well, I want to be right or don't be so sensitive. No,
Yeah.
I care about him and he cares about me. And so I love that. He was genuinely sorry.
Yeah.
And it made all the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to kind of talk about, another myth you said about tithe. We started giving when we first got married, but we didn't tithe probably till, I don't know, maybe 10 years into marriage, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was the best decision we ever made, and I can remember writing that first check because we wrote checks then. We didn't have other
We did
ways.
too.
We didn't have other ways to give.
Venmo wasn't
And,
a thing.
and no, and it was not the easiest thing to drop that in
Mm-hmm.
the collection plate because that was really how we gave back then. I guess we could have
Mm-hmm.
mailed it in, but we always gave when
Yeah.
we went to church. But when
Right.
we finally made that decision to tithe, it has amazed me, and I don't get the math in it. I don't get how God does more with 90% than we do with 100. I mean, how God
Yeah.
makes that happen.
Yeah.
But it's made a difference in our marriage, and it's something that we were on the same page with, and I think we've seen the blessings from it. And it's not
Yeah.
like we didn't go to the mailbox and get $1 million check or something like that. It
No.
wasn't. It was
No.
just knowing
No.
that we're obedient to God. And when you really think of it, 10% is not very much. That He didn't ask much of
No.
us at
It,
all.
it's not very much. And what it makes me think about a lot is, um, do I really trust him?
Mm,
And am I walking in faith? And when I trust and I'm walking in faith and the hard times come, I know that he has us, and whatever is happening, we will get to the other side of it. But it has been in those times when we have continued to tithe, even when it's been hard, that we've looked at each other and I mean, we've just said,
yeah,
but God. So I think that's been a huge piece of our faith journey together is figuring that out early.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I would just encourage people just give that a chance. In fact,
Hmm.
that's the only thing He says, "Test me" in the Bible.
Right.
So
That's right.
He's asking you to test Him in that,
Yeah.
and just let
Yeah.
Him show up.
Yeah.
So let's switch to, we got Christmas season coming up. We got the New Year coming in. And boy, if there's financial stress, it seems to heighten then. So how can couples keep financial stress from taking over as they enter into a season that we all love, most of us love,
Yeah.
but man, sometimes we don't love January and February when we
Yeah.
open the mail.
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is keep things in perspective.
Mm,
And I'll speak broadly to this. For one, things are not what bring you happiness, right? So your children see all these commercials about all the things that they
oh yeah.
need, and they start making their list, and it's a mile long. And so perspective is everything. And as parents, you get to put a framework around perspective. You can do a million things with the holiday season besides buying gifts that create an amazing holiday season. I can remember one year our daughter came out and she did have a list a mile long of all the things that she wanted, needed. Oh, I'm going to die if I don't get them. And so we just started being very intentional about doing some things differently. One of the things that we did, this was the only time I gave her permission to play ring and run. We had an elderly gentleman who lived in our neighborhood who we just all adored. And so I said, okay, 12 days out, we're going to do the 12 days of Christmas. And so on day number 12, we're going to give 12 of something, and you're going to figure out what that is, and we're going to create something fun around that. And then for 10, same thing, 10 of something. So 12 candy canes, 11 cookies, and then on down to one. But every single time, she could take whatever it was, take it to the front porch, ring the doorbell, and run. And
Oh,
she was like, oh my gosh, this is the most fun. And we never told him that it was her, but she got the most joy out of that. We went and we took an angel off the angel tree. And We went and we shopped for an angel and we put
Mm.
boxes together. For that, we did the Samaritan's Purse, the shoebox. So we try to be
Yes.
very intentional about taking the focus off gimme, gimme, gimme to what do we have the opportunity to do during this season and even beyond this season. So that's one thing I would say. The
That's
other
so
thing
good.
is, what's your capacity?
Yeah.
What are you willing to do? Uh, and that's not just like all the parties and all the things. Like it's making a decision. We don't have capacity to do a lot. So let's set it out there. Hey, actually, we're all going to draw names this year, and everything has to be handmade.
Mm.
Only handmade gifts for the family. That's an option. There's ways to approach the holidays that don't have to break the bank or have you looking at a credit card bill in January that makes you want to be sick at your stomach. But it starts now by actually creating a plan and then living by that and not getting caught up in all the rigmarole around the holidays. It won't be Christmas if. And you could even ask that question of the family. Hey, what makes Christmas special?
Mm.
Is it going and cutting down the Christmas tree and decorating it together and drinking hot chocolate and I don't know, making gingerbread men? I have great memories of things
Hmm.
happening in our neighborhood that had nothing to do with purchasing gifts and everything to do with spending time with people, doing things like icing
Yeah.
gingerbread men or baking
Yes.
sugar cookies, those sorts of things. So it starts by making a plan now, making some decisions about, hey, this is how we're going to do this, and then sitting down and having a family meeting, whether it's just the two of you as a couple making a decision, or it is you sitting down with the whole entire family, children included, and saying, this is our capacity. So we can be creative. Hey, we could not buy a single individual gift, and we could take a trip as a family and make a memory. So let's make some decisions about how we're going to take this pot of money and use it and celebrate the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus,
I love
not
that. Right.
not,
Right.
not the
Right.
culture, right?
Right. Oh, that's so good. It reminds me of I had a young couple. This was years ago, but they had been married even a year, and they did not have much money. They were both still in school and all this kind of stuff, and they were working hard. And she came up with the idea. She created coupons that she gave to different people in the family, like her older brother that had a baby. She gave him a coupon for a free night of babysitting, and for the grandmother
Absolutely.
that lived alone, that they would have her over for dinner. And they made memories with that. You know
Yeah.
that the next 10 years later, that grandmother's going to say, oh, yeah, I know what I got that year. I got that coupon. Things like that
Hmm.
that just make a difference. I know our kids, if we talked about, ask them what they got for Christmas different years, other than maybe a year my son got a dog or something like that that was really,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
lasted, they're going to talk about making cookies with mom, and they're going to talk
Yeah.
about all of those kind of things. And
Yeah.
I mean, every Christmas, they both call and say, when's mom making this particular kind of cookie? Because we want to make sure we're there, and so
Yeah.
we kind of get caught up in the world, sure.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking, one, you do have to be really careful. If you agree as a couple that you are not going to buy each other presents for Christmas and you're going to do something creative like coupons, if somebody goes and buys a gift and doesn't stick with that, you're just asking for trouble. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, if you commit to that, like that's the real deal. And don't say you're okay with that if you're not okay with it. If you are okay with it, then get creative and
Yeah.
do something fun. I can remember a Christmas we had agreed no presents. You had to do something made. Jay goes around to all these people that are my friends and interviews them. Creates this crazy video.
How cool.
I mean, it was just fun. But, those kinds of things, we still talk about that. One year, we picked our daughter up from school early. She was probably 7 years old. We took her on a mystery destination, and that was her Christmas. And it was actually to a Christmas concert in Nashville, and she still talks about it to this day.
Wow.
doing things like that, very different than tons of boxes under a
Sure.
tree, and the children care more about, playing outside an hour after they've opened all the presents, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I love it. That's good counsel. And I know it's hard. A lot of people are thinking, oh, I don't know if I could do that. But I think you can. And especially
Yeah.
if you start talking about it together, you can make those plans
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
make something happen. That's really great counsel. I love that.
Yeah. Well, especially if you are living on a tight budget, you can
Hmm.
get super creative. And I mean, even homemade gifts for people. I've made a homemade baked good for friends since I was 14 years old. And
Oh
I'm
my
still
gosh.
doing it to this day for the same people. And that was what I gave because I didn't really have money to do other
Yeah.
things. So I could do that.
But I bet they look forward to it every year.
I get
And,
asked, am
and
I
now you
going
can't
to
get, now you
get
can't stop, right?
That's right.
There's no way. Oh man, this is such a good conversation. I want the last question. What are you loving about your marriage today? You've talked about you and Jay, and you talked about where you guys are. What are you loving about your marriage today?
One thing I would tell you I love about our marriage is that there's a lot of laughter. We don't
Ah,
take each other too seriously or ourselves too seriously.
mhm.
I think we've learned that we're for each other, and we really are good friends. We enjoy spending
So good.
time together, and as empty nesters, we've had the opportunity to pour into a lot of younger couples, and
Mm,
that is my passion. And
mhm.
and so doing that together, it helps us to continue to grow because you're thinking, okay,
Absolutely.
we're talking about these things, and how are we doing with that?
Yeah.
And then we continue to grow. But I would have to say, lots of laughter, time together, adventures, and doing ministry together. It just feels full, and we're dealing with aging parents, so it's not that we don't have challenges. We
Sure.
absolutely do. Uh, it feels like we're together though on the journey. My
Yeah.
mom has dementia, and she doesn't know she has dementia, and I think I cried one night just because Jay looked at me and he goes, "Hey, whatever you need from me, if I need to go up and be with her, whatever you need, I want to help make that happen."
Wow.
And I just thought, man, I couldn't ask for more than that.
Absolutely.
We are not perfect, seeking to be healthy, not perfect, but on the journey, and it feels full and good.
Well, just that unselfishness in that
Yeah.
offer that Jay made, and that's what
Yes.
I think we do through marriage over the years, and that's why I hate it when I hear of couples that give up early and get a divorce after a few
Amen.
years, because I think
Yes.
it's going through those hard times and
Right.
figuring
Right.
out with God's help you can
Yeah.
go through them, and where you
Mhm.
get to that point where, yeah, I want to serve Nancy,
Yeah.
I want to, and she wants to serve me, and you get to that point, and wow, I think that's what marriage is really all about.
Yeah. I think it's figuring out how to walk the road together. And pride has to take a back seat. I mean, we're naturally
Yeah.
prideful and
Yep.
selfish, right? And so I think figuring out how to um, show up the best version of you. I think that's probably a really powerful lesson that I've learned. Like, if I'm not in a good place, it's easy for me to blame Jay. So I have to go take a walk
Yeah.
and, ask myself, like, what's going on here? Is this really Jay or is it me? And a lot of times, honestly, I'm stressed, or there's something going on here
Sure.
that I do need to have a conversation with him about, but it's way more about me than it is about him. He just happened to be right there at the
Right there.
moment.
That's so good. That's so
Yeah.
good. I've loved this. This has been so good. I know it's going to help so many people. If people want to find out more about you, and I'm sure they will, how's the best places? Where can they find you, Julie?
They can definitely find us at windshapemarriage.org. They can also follow us on Instagram at windshapemarriage. We're constantly putting out resources and giving people information to help them transform their marriage to the marriage they want it to be, right? We've talked all the
Absolutely.
way around that. today.
Ab-
That's what people are looking for. So
Absolutely. Yes, and I encourage you guys to go to WinShape Marriage. You're going to love the resources. Thank you for spending time. This has been a delightful conversation.
my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.